It's Wednesday, March 30th. Welcome to the Daily Shed. Hello friends, I am Chevy. Welcome to the Shed. Today is part 3 of our Essential Woodworking Tools series, and this is your next level tools. So we covered hand tools in part 1, the saws and the hammers. We covered your essential handheld power tools like a circular saw, sander, and a jigsaw in part 2, and a drill. Today we're going to cover one more hand tool and the stationary power tools that will round out your set of woodworking tools. 2 disclaimers before I start. One, I have the big door open today because it's beautiful outside, but also because my shop is well, that's number 2. The other disclaimer is my shop is a disaster from the recent fence project, so when I pick the camera up and show you guys these tools, don't assume that I'm always this disgusting. I'm not. So that's it. Let's get started. The very first tool I'm going to show you is a handheld or stationary tool, and that is going to be a router. Now I have 2 different routers. This is a palm router or a trim router, battery operated, and you saw this when we hung the shed sign because we used the keyhole bit. My other router is a much larger device, like this. Okay. And basically what these are is a drill motor that just spins one way and doesn't do anything else. At a very high rate of speed. You can get all sorts of cutting bits to put in these, so you can do things like cut that keyhole, you can round corners on boards, you can do straight cuts or plunge cuts. This is a plunge base. You can also mount one of these upside down in a table, and you can make trim pieces. You can buy trim cutting bits, you can make quarter round bits or Roman OGs and do picture frames and stuff like that. I don't have a table for this, mostly because my shop's small. The other reason is I just haven't made one. But the tool, the actual motor itself, which comes out of this thing that it's in, this is the most important part. Whether you have a base on it or you put it underneath a table, this is what's doing all the work. You can also work with these things just simply by setting it on your bench and clamping it down, and it's almost like having a router table. So this is, I don't know if this is going to be your first next level tool. It was not mine. My first next level tool is over here. So we're going handheld now. Welcome to the shop. My first next level tool, it was this. It was this exact saw. This is what is referred to as a miter saw. Some might call it a chop saw, or in this case, this is a compound miter saw. This is essentially a circular saw attached to an arm. And what you do with this is you can place your boards in here as such, and then make nice clean 90-degree cuts. The reason it's called a miter saw is if we look down here at the bottom, there is a miter gauge, and by adjusting this bed, if you loosen it, you can adjust the angle that this saw cuts. So that sets this angle, which is the blade angle, relative to this back fence. So if you need to make a 45-degree cut, say you're making a picture frame, this saw will do that. Now this saw is also called a compound miter saw because I have a second adjustment back here, which is covered in sawdust, which allows me to adjust the tilt angle of the blade. So I could cut a 45 this way and a 45 this way. This I would probably recommend before you go out and buy a table saw, simply because it's less dangerous than a table saw. You could operate that with very little instruction. You put the board in, you pull the handle down. It's made for cross-cutting, which would be against the grain of the wood, as opposed to rip cutting or ripping boards down the middle. For that, you're going to need a table saw. I don't know at what point in this configuration I would recommend the table saw. Personally, I think if you have a good chop saw and you have a good chop saw and you have a good bandsaw, there's not a whole lot of need for a table saw. Now, a bandsaw is essentially a couple of gigantic wheels, one of them powered, which hold a blade like such. This is a 92.5-inch blade that goes all the way down and around and up. So it's one continuous blade that spins along these wheels, and you'll see it cuts down here. You'll see this used in the opening of the shed video. A bandsaw is great for doing rotational cuts, like circular cuts. This blade is so thin you can move your pieces around here. It's also really good for doing rip cuts. Say I want to take a log and turn it into wood. I can raise this guide up and I can feed a log through here and I can rip boards that way. If you use a miter gauge in the miter slot here, you can get angled cuts. You could also put a fence on here to get accurate rip cuts, like you could on a table saw. I never realized how amazing a bandsaw was until I owned it. This one was given to me. As you'll see with all of my tools in this shop, they're mostly secondhand. That chop saw was my dad's. I guess it still is. He's not dead. So the bandsaw is an amazing tool. I honestly didn't know I needed it in my life, and then I got it and was like, how did I ever live without this? I think I'm going to show you the tape. No, we'll go to the drill press. All right, next up, drill press, which is a mess. This is a drill press. It is essentially a drill, like such, mounted on this big arm. This is a very old Delta drill press. Big arm, big motor with multiple steps so that you can run this thing at various speeds. And as you twist this handle, the drill goes down. What this allows you to do is not only does this make perfectly vertical cuts, both this way and this way. So whatever you lay on here is 90 degrees straight up and down. It also allows you to set the depth of the cut so that you can make repeatable depth cuts in various materials. Now this thing is adjustable in all sorts of different ways. You can raise this bed up and down. You can set this depth. You can lock it so that you could put a sanding disc. I put down here, I have drum sanding on it. You can get a drill press vise, which helps you hold stuff steady so that you can make repeatable cuts. This table, this is an old school desk. It comes off. There's a metal table under here. You can bolt this thing down so you can get really accurate drills with this. That's essentially what a drill press is. It makes super precise drilling very easy. Otherwise, you're going to use your hands to try and get the drill straight up and down, and that's not easy to do. They make devices to help you with that, but it's still not easy. The drill press is much easier. Next up, I'm still not going to say a table saw yet. I don't think. We'll look at the power sander. This is a combination belt disc sander. This came from Harbor Freight. It's like $40 or something. It's basically the exact same model that everybody else makes. It has a 6-inch disc, a 36-inch belt, and this is really great for doing cornering. You can round stuff on here for flattening things. This tool saves tons and tons and tons of hours. Amazing, amazing tool. So I would actually recommend this really early on, simply because of how much shaping you can do with it. So, fine, we'll go look at the stupid table saw. My table saw is a very old contractor style Craftsman table saw. It's kind of a piece of crap. It's super lightweight, which means it's really easy to move, which is both a good and a bad thing. In this shop, I can easily pull this out and move it around, but when I'm sawing, I really don't want this thing tipping over, which it comes close to doing. Now, the thing that makes a table saw dangerous is not the fact that this has a big saw blade on it. All of these tools have big saw blades, and obviously if you put your hand on it, you're going to get injured. Don't put your hand on the blade. It spins towards you, so as you feed material through it, it's pushing down and towards you on that material, which is mostly safe. It's safer than if it was trying to lift the material off the bed. When it becomes dangerous is when you start using this fence. If you do not know how to properly set your fence, and you're running material through here, and it gets caught between the blade and the fence, this thing acts like a shotgun and can shoot this at you at very high speed and injure you. I'm not going to say it's going to kill you, but I promise you I've been hit by many things flying off of the table saw because I was being an idiot, or I just simply didn't know what I was doing, and it's actually left bruises on my belly. That's not good. And when it happens, kickback is probably the reason for injury. If kickback happens, you're more likely to try to grab the board to stop it from happening, and that's when you're going to get your hand too close to the blade. Okay, some other next level tools. I told you I bought a jointer recently. That's what this thing is. This is a 4-inch jointer. It's got 3 spinning 4-inch blades. They're extremely dangerous because it's really easy to forget that there's a spinning blade in there. The idea is this fence is set up 90 degrees to this fence, so if I put a board on here and I run it through, it will take a very small cut off of this edge of the board until this edge of the board becomes perfectly flat with this bed. It'll also be perfectly 90 degrees to this face that you're in back here. That's essentially what a jointer does. And they call it a jointer because it's used for joining boards together. So if I was going to join these 2 boards together and I butt them up like this, you can see how uneven that gap is. Well, if we jointed this and made these 2 faces perfectly flat, they would glue together beautifully. And let's see, lastly, a thickness planer. In Europe or other parts of the world, you might call this a thicknesser, and the jointer might be called a planer. This is a thickness plane. Essentially, you feed boards through here. There's a feed roller that grabs it, shoves it out the other side against some spinning blades. You set your depth here. There's a knob up here so you can raise and lower the cutter, and it will make boards uniform thickness. Now, let's get this set back up. The thing to remember about a planer is some people think that a planer will make boards flat. That's not true. A planer will make boards smooth. It'll take out imperfections. But if you send a board through it, say, let's pretend like this is a board. If I send it through and it's twisted like this in the middle, as it runs through that roller, it's going to twist and come out the other side still twisted because the roller is pushing down on this as it feeds through. So it's not going to make the board flat if it's not already flat. It'll make it smooth and it'll make it a uniform thickness, but it's not going to take the twist or the cup out of your boards. That's it. A compressor. I have a compressor. I'll show you my compressor. This is my 22-gallon compressor. It's probably overkill for woodworking because all I really run off of it for woodworking is my nailer. I do have a finishing paint gun somewhere. I'm not sure where. You can get a little pancake compressor for under $100 that'll run a nailer just fine, and it takes much less time to recharge than this thing does. But as I told you before, I used to be a Chrysler mechanic, so I have a whole bunch of air tools for working on cars. I have body saws, such as this, air ratchets from working on cars all those years. So I do have a lot of other this stuff. When you go through a mechanic's toolbox and you pry bars and screwdrivers and wrench drawers, I've got metric and standard wrenches, and you don't need that stuff for woodworking. That's just for for me. So, that's it. The only thing I'm missing in my mind is dust collection. I do need to get some sort of dust collection system. If I missed anything else, put it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Give me ideas in the comments below. Let's discuss all these tools. And if you have any questions, ask them and I will answer on Friday. See you guys tomorrow.